Welcome to Mission Control. As your flight director, I'm thrilled to have you in the simulator today. In this explainer, we are targeting a highly notorious objective, the master budget. Specifically, the budgeted statement of financial position for Cambridge AS and A-level accounting 9706. Now, to truly master this, we aren't just going to read through textbooks. We are going to treat this exact exam paper like a highly complex flight system that requires absolutely perfect execution. And to help us out, we've got the telemetry from two of our test pilots today. First, we have pilot Alex, who has a terrible habit of overcomplicating data calculations and burning way too much time and fuel in the process. And then we have pilot Sam, who aggressively ignores structural boundary constraints and risks complete systemic breakdown. We're going to learn from their telemetry so you can navigate past these hazards and execute a flawless, full-mark touchdown. Right out of the gate, we are receiving a critical system warning pulled directly from the principal examiner reports. The telemetry reads, master budget is one of the most misunderstood areas in accounting. Let's fix that right now. When the senior examiners flag a massive structural misunderstanding like this across the board, it is a red alert scenario. We absolutely cannot ignore it. We need to pop the hood, figure out exactly why candidates are crashing their scores here, and completely deconstruct the mechanics together. So here is our official flight plan for today's simulation. 1. Pre-launch telemetry. 2. Monitoring the approach trajectory. 3. Propulsion engagement. 4. The interactive radar challenge. And finally, 5. The touchdown sequence. Let's move straight into Section 1. Pre-launch telemetry. Establishing core exam objectives. Before we even clear the launch pad, we have to establish our core parameters. What's fascinating about this exam is that you cannot simply memorize the flight manual and expect to survive. The examiners are rigorously testing whether you can actually analyze and evaluate a complex budget under extreme pressure. To successfully clear orbit and secure those top-tier marks, you have to demonstrate complete competence across all three of these cognitive domains: knowledge and understanding, analysis, and evaluation. It's not just about knowing a formula. You have to prove you can actively interpret what the financial telemetry is telling you about the business's future trajectory. And this brings us right to our first major hazard. This brilliantly illustrates where our profile of pilot Alex constantly veers off course. Alex burns massive amounts of fuel, meaning exam time, isolating data calculations. But if you compare isolated answers versus cross-topic connections, it's the connections that act as a gravitational slingshot to significantly higher marks. It is never just about calculating a variance in a total vacuum. It's about explaining exactly how an adverse sales variance aggressively impacts the cash budget and how that inevitably alters the receivables balance on your final budgeted statement of financial position. You have to see the entire interconnected dashboard, not just one blinking light. Navigating to Section 2, monitoring the approach trajectory, the method marks strategy. Okay, let's look at the console UI and map out our answer framework. The absolute secret weapon here is mastering what we call the method mark strategy. Examiners actually award marks for your navigational process. Think of problem solving as a strict, non-negotiable four-step protocol. First, identify the given information from the scenario's data feed. Second, break it into logical, manageable steps. Third, solve the problem systematically with crystal clear workings. And fourth, run a diagnostic check for reasonableness. If you execute this exact procedure, you secure vital method marks, even if a highly complex cash flow calculation is just slightly off at the final docking phase. Your logical, step-by-step process still gets heavily rewarded. But here is where we have to issue a severe warning, because this is where pilot Sam's trajectory usually falls apart. Sam ignores strict procedural conventions, and it results in a systemic breakdown. Failing to follow these visual boundary constraints will bleed easily avoidable marks from your score. The examiners are demanding proper headings, correct terminology, appropriate formats, and incredibly clear annotation. For instance, if you are drafting a budgeted statement of financial position and you miss the as-at date in the heading, or you fail to subtotal your non-current assets properly, you are essentially telling the examiner you don't grasp formal reporting structures. It's a massive red flag. Incoming critical system alert. The examiner reports have officially noted that candidates consistently confuse key terminology. So, our strict protocol here is simple. Always define your terms before deploying them. For example, do not just toss the phrase master budget into an extended written response without securing it first. Briefly define it as the ultimate consolidation of all departmental budgets, like your sales, production, and cash budgets, into the final budgeted income statement and statement of financial position. Anchor your entire analysis with a rock-solid definition before you throttle up. Engaging Section 3. Mid-flight propulsion engagement, optimizing your flight path. I am initiating a brief mid-flight simulation override. Before we fire the secondary boosters to secure maximum marks on these written evaluations, you need to optimize your own flight path. Subscribe to Ace the Exams at the handle @AceTheExams right now and turn on all notifications. It's an absolutely essential maneuver to keep your exam strategies running at peak performance. Override complete. All right, simulation resumed. Suddenly, the crew encounters a massive roadblock, mid-paragraph. Their evidence links are failing and the trajectory is dropping. To save the flight, we need to inject a structural template for evaluating evidence quality. This is how you demonstrate true elite-level mastery when discussing something like a budget variance. Step 1. Identify the specific limitations in the data provided. Step 2. Explicitly note the underlying assumptions that were made in the original forecast. Step 3. Acknowledge alternative interpretations of those variances. And Step 4. Clearly state the ultimate effect on your final conclusions. Using this specific 4-part structure makes your written analysis virtually bulletproof. Now initiating Section 4, Interactive Viewer Radar Challenge Live Audience Tracking. We are engaging the live audience tracking system now. I am initiating a simulated 60-second visual countdown on your HUD. Consider the complex data structures of a master budget scenario. Here is your challenge. Can you actively scan the telemetry and locate the core variables that separate the initial cause from the downstream effect? When you are analyzing the figures, are you merely listing numbers? Or are you tracking how a sudden 10% drop in expected sales volume inherently ripples through your inventory levels, impacts your trade payables, and violently alters your closing cash balance? Pinpointing the exact difference between the trigger event and the resulting financial cascade is what separates an average pilot from a top-tier candidate. Let's execute our debris detection protocol. We are pulling the top 3 compliance failures directly from the principal examiner logs. Error code 01, confusing cause and effect. The system fix, map your causal relationships clearly and sequentially. Error code 02, forgetting format and presentation. The fix is to rigorously verify your strict visual conventions on those balance sheets. And error code 03, answers lack specific context. The mandatory fix here is to always tie your data back to the specific business scenario provided. Generic, memorized textbook answers are basically space debris. You must apply the budget parameters specifically to whether the business in the question is a manufacturer or a retailer. Furthermore, when the mission requires you to evaluate or compare 2 distinct budget scenarios, a lot of students just list off isolated facts like they are reading a grocery list. Navigating true comparative analysis requires identifying both the similarities and the differences. You have to utilize comparative connectives, words like whereas, similarly, or in contrast. Using these specific connecting terms and backing them up with hard evidence from the scenario is exactly how you draw powerful, high-scoring conclusions about their relative financial impacts. Entering final approach with Section 5, Mission Accomplished and Touchdown, the pre-flight question scan checklist. Both Pilot Alex and Pilot Sam have successfully corrected their trajectories. Let's distill this entire simulation into the ultimate 5-step standardized sequence you absolutely must use on test day. 1. Identify the key elements from the scenario's data feed. 2. Apply the relevant accounting principles. 3. Execute your analysis with perfectly clear workings for all of your schedules. 4. Verify your results. Ask yourself, does that closing cash figure actually make logical sense? And 5. Present everything in the appropriate strict format. If you follow this standardized sequence, your master budget, from the initial sales forecasts all the way down to the final statement of financial position, will balance flawlessly. Touchdown confirmed! You have navigated the master budget framework with absolute precision. But remember, perfect execution requires constant practice. Before you log out of the simulator, make sure to subscribe to Ace the Exams at @AceTheExams. Enable that notification bell and drop a comment below sharing your specific subject and tier so we can prep the next simulation. I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If a sudden global supply chain shock increased raw material costs by 20% tomorrow, which specific part of your master budget would systemically fail first? Think about how that shockwave ripples through your financial position. Understanding those deep connections is where the real accounting happens. Great flying today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.